Hi, and welcome into our short talk or a shorter talk on tapering. Before I go and jump into this, be aware, tapering is one of the hardest things to actually do correctly, and it's heavily researched. And what we found is everyone is a little bit special, and that we need to go and design these individually. However, there are some kind of ground rules or lessons that we can go and learn. So let's go and talk about those. First things first, a taper is designed to maximize performance. That's the goal. If you want to think about this like a chart, let's use some colors. When I'm really fatigued, my performance is really low here, right? Over time, as I allow rest, it's going to go up. So it will increase to a point, and then it kind of tips over and goes downhill, right? Where this is too much rest, right? And this is too much fatigue here. Ideally, I would like to race when I'm, up in this zone right up here in this kind of box. But a lot of our time, I would argue, like you spend kind of on this face here, where I'm really fatigued to a bit fatigued, but I can still increase my performance even more. The goal of the taper is to get you into, this zone right here, into this magical, sparkly zone right here. Maximize performance. So what do we know about this that we can kind of apply to a lot of folks as general knowledge? First thing, it's pretty clear I can do this once or twice a year and that's it. A true taper is difficult to actually do, and it only works 1 or 2 times a year maximally. Each taper I can hold for 1 to maybe 2 weeks if I'm really good for the majority of folks. That means if I have a lot of races, if I race, let's say 10 to 12 a year, I've got 1 or 2 of these that are an A race where I'm going to try to go and taper for it. If again I had 12, I'd say 3 to 5 more are going to be like a B race where I'll rest going into them. So I'll have like a recovery week, but I'm not going to taper for them. The final one, C's, are just kind of everything else that doesn't really matter. It's there for me to just practice, going out and racing. And maybe I focus on race start, or maybe I focus on hydration or whatever. It's not really important how I do at them. It's just experience. Point 2, it's pretty clear as well. The quality of our taper depends on the amount of training time I have before it. So if I have, for example, 8 weeks of training beforehand going into a taper, it's going to be, actually, let me do this. That's going to be a better taper than 1 week. The reason for this is believed to be because I can accrue more training stress and cause more adaptation specific to what I need for that race in 8 weeks or than 1, which means as I add in recovery here in a specific way, I'm going to get a larger effect here, and I'm going to get more performance on the 8 weeks than I will out of the 1. So this is why we planned it out, is we planned these ones out to try to maximize our time beforehand walking into our taper. So taper types, there's a couple of them that are commonly held. So the first one is generally called the progressive, I'll put prog, stepwise, declining. This is a fancy way of saying we're going to reduce our load in steps progressively. All right, so that's our fancy way of saying that. There are 2 types here. We can do a declining exponential. You might also go, and here this called as a log one, or a linear decline. The second one is just going to be just a gigantic step down to low time. I'll just go and call that a low time. If I were to draw a chart of these things just to go and explain this. So we train going up into this. So I'll go and make a general box that we'll say is training. The first type, we're going to start up here, and if this is training time, so we'll put time versus going up to the race, put R for race. What I do is I actually would go like this and decrease, and that drop in time goes and drops off very fast at first and then slows down as I approach the race. The linear still drops the same amount, but it does so in a straight line version of it. The last one is just basically I drop it immediately down and we're at the exact same tier the whole time. So this is 1, 2, 3. Of these three, these two have been shown to be the most effective ones. So how do we actually go and do this? 4, decrease time, but not intensity. So what's occurring is when I'm actually going through these taper curves over here, these things right here, I'm going to decrease the amount of total volume I train. So my total training time steps down, steps down, steps down, steps down. But when I actually go and train, it's actually moderately hard to hard or high intensity work. So it just becomes very specific work, just not very long. And the thought there too is we're continuing to apply small amounts of stress to maintain adaptations we have begun to go and gain at this point, and to slow down how fast I go and pull out of this fatigued state so I don't overshoot. So it's kind of a twofold, and here's where it kind of gets very personalized as to how long that goes and lasts. So 5, time or length of a taper totally depends on our person. If we say in general, though, the research shows somewhere like 8 to 14 days tends to be ideal. So it's 8 to 14 days out from the event. So this could be the race day here, and this could be 8 days out, or it could be 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 or 14. This is why you need to work with a person who understands physiology and understands the research behind how to actually go and taper, because this is difficult to plan out. Last thing is, just to go and throw this out here, what do you do right before? Right before. Well, welcome to one more part where it's like debated. We know that this training right before I go into a taper is important. There are groups that believe I need to double the amount of volume I'm doing. There are groups that say don't increase the volume, increase the intensity. But we know that the basic goal is we want to go and produce enough stress here that when we go into the taper here, that we're going to recover and gain more performance than just a general recovery week. That's the goal, right? Again, I won't go into depth on point 6 because it just depends on the person, and it takes time to go and figure out what actually works. So that's the general kind of idea behind what the taper is and what we do. I really don't want to go beyond this just because of the fact that this is so individualized that I feel like if I do, I'll be going and giving you bad advice. Hopefully you have a better idea of what this actually is, some thoughts behind it, and if you have a question, please again go and comment or bring it into our practice.